if you do get to that point where you're on TV on the regular and you come up, well, yeah, you can get to that point where you're making $500,000, 6, 7, 800K, and if you can do that for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and you're smart with your money, you invest it, you don't live beyond your means, and you can have a wonderful life. But everybody doesn't get that. Everybody doesn't get to be a millionaire and be the top guy and get the pay-per-view money, so that's the reality of being a pro wrestler. And I'm very fortunate because I've been a pro wrestler for 20 years, a little longer than that now. I've had no other job but pro wrestling. And I'm very, very fortunate that at this stage, I'm still on TV and still relevant. So.
What's the toughest part of adjusting to life after wrestling when someone retires or is released?
I'm very fortunate to say that I don't know that firsthand. I have been so fortunate, as I said, I think the average WWE career is comparable to the average NFL career. I think it's like 5 years.
Wow.
The average.
Okay.
We think about, the people like Miz who you've seen on TV for 20 years,
Right.
But then you forget about, the Deuce and Domino.
Right.
You saw them pretty prominently, but it wasn't for a long time.
And for me, like Ahmed Johnson always sticks out, but then all of a sudden he was gone.
There's a lot, if you really sit and think about it, there are a lot of people that you saw on TV for a few years and then they were gone. And a lot of the time, if you've had that television time, you can work the indies for a while and still get good money working the indies, and that works. But then after a while, that kind of runs out, because they'll start right off the TV. You get hot money because you're right off the TV. Everybody wants to see you. But after you've been around the indies for a little while, that money starts to go down, and promoters aren't offering you right off the TV money anymore. And life kicks in. If you're a single guy and, you're a wrestler and you don't have all those expenses, but you got a wife, you got some kids, there comes a point for a lot of people where wrestling's not paying the bills anymore. And you got to get another gig. And I have friends and, former colleagues that are in that position now, but they were huge stars. And after TV, they worked the indies for a while and they were able to do it. And then little by little, things just kind of transitioned to a point where they're not a wrestling TV star anymore. A lot of guys I know are car salesmen, a lot of different gigs, man. You do what you got to do. I know Charlie Haas is doing well for himself these days, selling medical equipment. But I think he still takes some indie bookings here and there. And I think, some wrestlers will still take some indie bookings here and there for some extra money, but it can't interfere with the job,
Right.
And I, from what I understand, because like I said, I've been fortunate. Since from the time I left WWE, I worked in Japan. I took a year off from Japan. I took a year off from wrestling and started jiu-jitsu. And then I went to Impact. And then I left Impact under terrible circumstances, like some real bullshit with management. One person in particular. And then I was working the indies. But I was so fortunate that I had so much TV time and impactful TV time that I worked the indies for years. And I stayed booked. And I would go work the indies. I would work my merch table, sell my 8x10s and my photoshops and my photo ops. And
I had an opportunity to work a couple of those conventions with you, so that was pretty neat to see. And your line it was always packed. The table was always mad busy.
But the reality is it's not always that way. There are some smaller indie shows where, there are some indie shows where I make more money at the table than I do my booking fee. And at the time, I think, from right off of TV, I was booking for like $4,000. But over time, that price goes down. And you can tell by your demand, So you get to a point where I personally never booked myself at less than $1,000. And I'd have promoters that would try to, well, what if I give you 3 dates at $750? No, because promoters talk. And once you get to me, my $1,000 was a cutoff, my minimum. Sometimes I'd be at a show But yeah, my table would be great. And I'd make more money than my booking fee. Other times, maybe I made a couple $100, you know. It wasn't always glitz and glamour, you know. And sometimes you're at the VFW hall in Poughkeepsie or whatever, you know. And it's, you know, there are no limousines in big arenas and, you know, those, but I was still making money as a professional wrestler. I was still my own boss, still doing what I wanted to do. You know, I'm working a Friday and a Saturday or maybe a Saturday. And then sometimes it was just a Sunday. And then there were sometimes I might have just 2 bookings for that whole month, you know. But fortunately, it never got so bad for me that I had to take on a regular job. And I always managed to be able to stay in wrestling. And then famously, you know, that comeback at the Royal Rumble led to this whole new chapter where I was able to get back on TV and get back in, you know, the Hurt business and then, you know, now the Hurt Syndicate. So
First time we ever saw Brock dance.
yeah, right? Oh man, Brock's a great guy. No, that's another story for another question. But the reality is, everybody doesn't get rich and famous. Everybody doesn't become a millionaire. Lots of people, due to financial literacy, make a lot of money and spend a lot of money. Especially when you come from a place where you were broke, no one ever taught you what to do with money. And you get money and right away you want to buy the cars and the jewelry and the clothes and the trips, and you don't plan for the future because some people think it's gonna last forever. I'm gonna be like The Miz and be on TV for 20 years. The average is 5 years. Most people don't get that luxury. And I gotta imagine talking to some of my friends that it's pretty heartbreaking when you watch TV and you see people that you worked with and you know that they're still making high 6 figures, you know, some low 7, and you're back punching the time clock, you know. It's depressing. Some guys really go to pieces. Some people don't handle it well. Some, you know, they take the adage, don't be sad because it's over. Be happy because it happened.
Because it happened.
You know?
I know.
And, you know, they appreciate the fact that, hey, I was there. And you could say whatever you want. Oh, you're a has-been. You're washed up. Bitch, you would never were. You know?